Thank you for checking out the Media Marketing Podcast, a place where you can learn all things media and marketing related. Don't miss a beat in boosting your business and your brand. In each episode, you'll gain valuable insights, tools, and strategies to apply to your marketing efforts. And now your host, Brian Cargill.
All right, here we are at Good Coffee in Portland, Oregon. I'm joined by Giselle Waters, and if you guys hear some construction and people walking by, that's because they are working on things around here in the building. But let's jump right into things. Giselle Waters is a digital strategist with a background in content, social impact, and media. Currently, she works as Associate Director of Content Strategy and Social Impact at Madfish Digital. Outside of that position, she developed and teaches the social media course for the New School's Digital Marketing Certificate. In her free time, she serves as the Communications Chair for Be Local PDX, a nonprofit supporting companies in Oregon using business as a force for good. Thank you, Giselle, for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
This is awesome.
Will be a treat.
Yeah, and we were just talking before this. You were doing a teaching thing, or you're getting ready to do some teaching in the near future?
Yeah, just a little nervous about it, but it'll be good. I'm excited. It's a new experience for me, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've been really busy.
Just a little bit, yeah. I like to keep myself busy. It's definitely all busyness of my own making.
Yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse to have all the things, but.
Yep. I just need to work on not doing them all at once. That would probably help, but.
Yeah, kind of breaking it out throughout the year.
Making progress.
And then I wanted to tell the audience a little bit about how we met. I was at an American Marketing Association event, and you were speaking at a luncheon, and you were talking about brand. And so maybe you can talk about a little bit about your background and Madfish Digital.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I started my career in digital marketing. I was actually primarily doing social. I managed the social media accounts for Power Rangers and Paul Frank. So some very B2C brands that were on the larger side when I started working with them. And then I actually moved out to New York with my best friend, who is now my wife, but we moved out to New York and I started working in media. So I did a couple years doing sort of social media and editorial, a little bit of content strategy for Thrillist Media Group, and then I worked at a small startup called Spoon University that got acquired by Food Network. And then when my wife decided that she wanted to go back to school, we actually moved back to Portland, and we were kind of like looking around trying to find the right spot. She was going to school for public health, and I ended up finding Madfish Digital, which was very small at the time, around 10 people, and they were working primarily in SEO and paid. And when I came on, I started actually as like a client strategist, account manager kind of role, and then have moved into this content and social impact role as we've grown up to about 18 folks. So really exciting. We now primarily focus in design, paid media, content, and SEO. So really sticking true to our roots, but expanding out as we go.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's a lot of things in there I kind of wanted to unpack. That was great.
Sure.
Really exciting. You're a coast to coaster from California to New York, and how does marketing or the approach to advertising? I think now we live in a globalized world, but did you notice some nuances versus this coast versus New York?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because I was in media in New York, it was just really different. When I started out, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I went to Cal, and then my family's actually from the Oregon area. And so when we ended up in the Oregon area, I had started working at this sort of smaller agency, Bonfire Marketing, which still exists. And when I started out there, I just kind of learned about how marketing was pretty fast-paced. We were working with clients who were in New York and LA, and so we kind of had that experience as a digital agency. But when I went out to New York, I kind of found out how global media and marketing could be. We got really into data there, beyond kind of just looking at our own analytics, but actually looking at kind of worldwide trends. And it was really in sort of this golden age of Facebook, where everyone was using Facebook to get their articles out there. It was a big traffic driver, and so it was just a different experience. I think I noticed here, specifically in Portland, especially now, just like a big focus on values and purpose-driven business. and this sort of drive to have a more sustainable business model. And that's something that, we've definitely carved out for ourselves in this particular area. There are, of course, B Corps and purpose-driven businesses everywhere, but I think with Portland's sort of concentration, it's one of the highest concentrations of B Corps in the country, and I think that really impacts our marketing and the way that we speak to our customers.
Yeah, especially here on a local level, because people, they're voting with their dollar, right?
So vote every day.
Yeah. So when you're, who you decide to work with, and having businesses, and I think this is a good segue, businesses that have a mission that aligns with your own core values as a customer, and really emphasizing that, and then showcasing that to the world. I think some businesses, are kind of like profit-driven first and maybe mission-driven second, whereas I don't know, you can do both, and you can actually thrive more with a mission-driven and having your core values at the forefront of your organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 86% of potential customers in America are looking for businesses who are, doing more than just making money. They believe they have to do social good as well. There is also a $1.2 trillion opportunity for businesses who make their sustainability credentials clear. It's not even about necessarily like setting an unrealistic goal for yourself. It's really about just showing that your values align with the values of your customers. People obviously gravitate towards people that they relate to, and so making sure that your business is following through on that is important. And I think especially for small businesses, we tend to see really humble business owners who don't want to kind of talk too much about themselves, or they feel like it's sort of braggadocious to talk about the impact that they're making. But that's really important information for your customers to have, and not being afraid to connect those values back to your marketing is really important. So, finding ways to share about the impact that you're making that isn't, you don't have to make it like, oh, I'm making this impact. You can say, we're working on this project, it matters to us because, and then connect that back to your business values that are applicable.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you really touch upon a good spot here where small business owners, they don't want to talk about themselves. They want to maybe put the emphasis back on the business. But I think people are curious about those whys. Why did you start this business? What are the things that mean something to you, and showcasing that to everyone out there.
I think.
What would you? Oh, go for it.
Oh, just the thing I was going to say is that I feel like that's just so indicative of the way that we're talking about marketing right now, right? Like last year in 2019, I feel like there was this big push around storytelling, and I think the prediction for this year is community. And so really thinking about how do you create that community and that story in an authentic way, as opposed to kind of creating authenticity. So just, being true to who you are and being true to your values and how those business values connect back to your personal values. It's all very Brene Brown, but something that I think is important. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. Yeah, creating authenticity. And for the folks at home, that was air quotes out there. So
sorry about that.
No, I think that's great. Because a lot of brands are like, how can we be more real? It's like, no, just be real, be
real.
authentic.
It's not that hard.
And so, for me, I think in media, that's not, sprucing everything up so it looks very polished. It's actually allowing things to look more organic and, kind of realistic, that you're just using your iPhone or the quality isn't as good, but the content is what's really important. That's what you're getting across to your audience.
Yeah, and it's relatable that way.
Yeah. Well, we kind of, we've started to dive into some things, but, I guess bringing it back to Giselle, what at the end of the day, what makes you passionate? What's your favorite part about what you do?
Yeah, I guess to give you some background on that, when I was in college, I really thought that I was going to end up working in nonprofit theater. That was sort of where my passion lay. During college, I really obviously loved storytelling, and I felt like live performance is something that is really different than the way that we experience stories right now. And so when I eventually, that wasn't a great business/career move for me at the time, but as I found kind of my place in digital marketing and in content and social impact, I think the thing that's really drawn me to Madfish and drawn me to this B Corp community is that I've realized how much impact you can make at a for-profit business, right? That's not actually impeding our ability to make an impact, it's empowering it. That sort of money system that we are, living in, regardless of whether we like living in a capitalist system or not, it is a part of where we're at right now, and we need to use it as a force for good as opposed to something that is, destructive to our environment and to the people in it. I was at a B Corp conference where I actually put together the presentation that Brian attended originally, and one of the focuses there was this idea of creating an inclusive and regenerative economy. And so the idea of that is that what you do to the land, you do to the people, and what you do to the people, you do to the land. So really understanding that those two things go together and you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, I know. What's the rate right now? We're burning 2.5 Earths. If everyone lived like Americans, we'd be screwed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we kind of are, regardless. And so it's the time for action is now, right? 533 B Corps signed on to be carbon neutral by 2030 as of the SB 25, SB 30, but when that conference happened, I think it kind of reinforced how important this is and how businesses have to be partners in making climate change, eradication and causing that happen.
Yeah, having that part of their business model.
Yeah.
Or having it as something that's a visible, tangible goal that they're working towards. Mm-hmm. You're very passionate about B Corp. Maybe you can talk to people what it is and kind of what that process looks like for organizations. Should some of these smaller business owners can make that consideration?
Yeah.
Or should they wait till they're at a bigger size?
Yeah, I suggest becoming a B Corp as soon as you can. It is easier when you have less people, right? You are going through, it's a big impact assessment essentially, and it's different for each type of business. So a marketing agency like Madfish does a different certification than a large e-commerce business or commerce business like Patagonia. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot easier to do that when you have less people. It's more inexpensive when you have less people. And you're really able to kind of drive that forward and then just have to recertify every 3 years. So it's a little easier to start at the beginning, and that process really is starting by going through the impact assessment, seeing kind of where you're at, and then you can work with consultants for free if you're in the Portland area. We have programs that are for free to help you with certification, and if not, reaching out to your local B Local group, which are across the country.
That's awesome. And it's a nonprofit organization, right?
Yes, nonprofit. A working board. We currently have no paid employees. We're working to change that. But yeah, we put on a conference and do a lot of stuff around B Corp.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just it helps people kind of keep them accountable, and then also you have some resources that you're able to tap into. And then so small business owners out there, it's good to get on that early. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I think you kind of mentioned some statistics. You mentioned how the talk that I attended was aligning your brand values with your public image, your public message. And so you mentioned already some of the stats behind that, but some of the things I took away were the benefits behind having an alignment between your brand was lower turnover, empowerment of your employees, and then obviously you have a positive impact or a positive perception in the community. Are there some other benefits I'm missing there, or?
I think that those are all really important. There's kind of the internal impact like you talked about with turnover and employee engagement, which we've seen really boost productivity. So that's an important element of kind of growing that internal motivation and intrinsic motivation in your business. You're building these entrepreneurs who are passionate about working for your business. Mm-hmm. And then I think just on the positive public and social perception, that's very real, but you're also actually doing good, right? And so you're creating purpose in your work. The other thing is that I think it's a great sales tactic, right? As much as we talk about it as this is something that we're doing because it's intrinsic to our values, it's also great for marketing, right? It's connecting that message back to your clients or your customers. You're really teaching them about what a B Corp is and why purpose is important in business. It's something that they kind of know, but connecting that back to, that certification is a great way to grow that message and help them vote every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. so we've kind of jumped right into it, but I think for some of these business owners, they're probably like, whoa, like values, like where do I even begin, like outlining that? Like maybe, I mean, I think some business owners, depends on where they're at, some might have just jumped right in and thought about, hey, I have this great product or great service that I want to bring to the world. Do you have any tips for creating a core set of values, or do people need to rework their mission to reflect a greater vision of what they're trying to do for the world?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the place I would start is with your kind of mission and core purpose for your business. And if you don't have that, I would start with writing that. I think that's really important. You know, what is the purpose of your business in the world? What are you wanting to help people do? And then through that, kind of seeing like what are the core values that you want to be true about your business, right? At Madfish, we really focus on being collaborative, genuine, accountable, fun-ish, and innovative. And those are alive and well. They, you know, are part of how we evaluate our team, right? They're part of our review system. They're part of how we assess whether or not our products and services are the right choice for people. And they're also a way that we choose clients. You know, they help us know who is a good fit for us in the long term. And so if you are kind of at that point where you're ready to create those values, I am going to plug Brene Brown and just say that in Dare to Lead, her most recent book on work, they have a sort of values exercise that people can go through, and you know, you can do it for yourself personally. I highly recommend doing that, where you're choosing 2 values, but you can also do that for your business. So maybe getting together with your senior leadership team, or if you're a solopreneur, doing that by yourself, kind of going through and saying like, what are the things that I want people to feel when they interact with my business? What do I want them to know just on that first interaction, and then throughout our relationship together?
That's awesome. Yeah, those are some great references that you brought in there too with Brene Brown. And yeah, I think, so I guess, yeah, taking time to create you know, is it a list of words that people would kind of pick that feel right to them? And then that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, can there be too many? Can you kind of start having too many values that almost you're like, okay, that's just too much? And then like when you go to the sales pitch for your customers, there's like maybe they get overwhelmed, or they don't really, it gets muddled. It kind of devalues all of the values if you have too many, right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think between 3 and 5 is plenty. I know that some folks do sentences, so that is an option. Like if you feel like a word isn't enough, I like a word because it's cleaner, and because I did a lot of copywriting for social, and so short and succinct I think is valuable. But if you do want to have like a word, like I know that some folks will be like, you know, we're striving to make this service or area like more open to change, or, you know, any of those kind of sentencey things, I think that that's fine. But I would lean towards 3 to 5 values, and I like odd numbers, again, also just as someone who wrote a lot of listicles and things like that. So I think 3 or 5 would be fine. And just keeping those like really core to your business, something that you feel like is going to be felt by your customers and by your team. Because if it's just words that you like, it's not really going to make a difference. You know, you can use those in other places. They don't have to be your core values.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I'm with you too. I'm a big bullet person, so just like the less words to the point, the better. And then I think you had some exercises or some roadmaps. I think that's a big thing that Madfish does, is help come in and identify some of those core values, or they'll work with you, consult you through that process.
Yeah, if we have businesses who want to do that, that's definitely something we can help with on our consulting side. There are also some really great organizations here that I think can do that, here in Portland, who can do that really effectively. Future Work Design is a great example of that. It's a very intersectional, diverse company that has a lot of experience in that area. So just depending on kind of what you need, a lot of people, it's just about finessing the messaging of those values. How do I make sure those are right? That's something that we can definitely help with at Madfish, and something that we're always happy to work on.
Yeah, I think that's great. And then you guys will do an assessment of all materials, right? Because I think kind of gets up there and it's intertwines with your actual branding of like your logo and maybe your taglines, but then you're trying to make sure that those values also come to the forefront.
Yes.
So like, is that conveyed on an RFP? Is it conveyed on like any of the touch points internally and externally, right?
Yeah, it could be branding, it could be messaging, it could be your website, it could be your social media profiles. We'll look at that. We do like branding guidelines, and within those we'll actually do like an inclusivity kind of statement that talks about how to make sure that your business is adhering to those inclusivity standards, whether that's being ADA accessible and web accessibility, which is really important. Beyonce just, suffered the repercussions of not having an accessible website with a huge fine. And then that's just really important for businesses. And then on the other side of that is the sort of branding and messaging component. Are you being cohesive? Does everything kind of like bubble from your branding through all of your marketing efforts and your touch points?
Yeah, that's huge. And then I actually didn't hear about the Beyonce scandal. Yeah, maybe you can explain to the listeners too.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know a ton of the details. This would be like a great question for our design director, but Beyonce had a website that was, I believe it was like both the text wasn't as visible, and then there was like some flashing, I think, of like kind of, just like lights in different colors and things like that, and it was really cool and edgy, but it meant that screen readers couldn't read the website, which is a really important web accessibility thing. And as we're kind of moving into this new era of doing so many things online, I know that new is maybe a stretch considering the internet's been around for 30 years, but with sort of the emergence of web accessibility as a priority. That's everything from like the alt text on your images when you're posting to Instagram or Twitter or on your website, to things like making sure that your text is clear and isn't like covering each other and things like that. I feel like I'm not describing this super well on audio, but just making sure that everything is really clear for a screen reader is important. And there are some tools that you can actually put your website through that'll tell you if changes need to be made, if a screen reader would do it. And I would suggest for anyone to use a screen reader on their own website to make sure that it is accessible, because that's a really important thing in terms of building an inclusive website.
Yeah, no, I think you're doing a great job. Yeah, we're talking about the abstract, we're talking about something physical, and you're doing a great job describing it. No, you're doing awesome. And I think that's really helpful, because that's your storefront, is your website, and that's the first. I mean, other than if they have an interaction with the person or they see an advertisement, that's going to be that's going to be one more touch point that they have with you. And so making sure that it's accessible for everyone, and that people don't feel like they're being excluded. And so if they're not able to read the text, then they're definitely going to be like, okay, what's going on here? Is this even geared towards me? And I think we live in an age where making people feel respected, making people feel that they're getting value out of your organization, that that your values align with their own is huge. So I'm going to take a quick break here. The battery's running low. We're going to replace those, and we'll be back in a second.
Perfect. Sounds good.
A big thank you to our sponsors over at songtub.com. That's right, song or music and a tub, like a bath, but more fun to say. Tub. Anyway, you can check out Songtub's website for any of your music needs. In fact, the song playing in the background right now is from Songtub. So why pick them over anyone else? Well, they curate the music. And I know the guys, so that means I know that they're selecting great music for your project. A lot of other companies will brag about how many songs they have, maybe 100,000, 200,000, maybe even 1 million. But honestly, I don't have time for that. I don't have the time to just sit down and go next, a song not so great, trying to figure out where the best music is. Songtub.com, great place to get your music, and now I'm excited to offer you the first month for free if you go to songtub.com/pro, P-R-O, and we have a promo code for you. Yes, that's right, my name, your host, Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, and that will give you your first month free to have access to a huge music library that you can use towards your next video project, podcast, or any of your general audio needs. Anyway, back to the show. So, now changing gears, talking about growth. So Patagonia, they've been around for a while, but say that you're a smaller business and you finally have moved through the stages of survival and you're actually making some money. But then you start bringing on more people. You bring on a chief investment officer. You bring on a chief operations officer. All these different people that are telling you different things, and then you start seeing businesses maybe losing sight of their original vision that they had. at that stage, I mean, do you have any advice for people, especially because we're catching some of these business owners early. So before they do that, should they do an assessment every 6 months, every year to say, hey, are we still aligned with our core values? And then if they've lost those core values, like recreating those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't really want to be changing your core values, like you want to be sticking close to those. If they are no longer like alive and well in your organization, you need to look at whether you want them to be alive and well in your organization. We actually do quarterly assessments. So we do quarterly strategic planning with a business coach, but you could do that by yourself with just sort of a run through of questions, assessing like, do these values feel like they're alive and well? Does it feel like everyone in the business is living these values? And then we actually do like sharing examples of folks in the business who are living the values and how that works out. This person was collaborative on this project, this person was really accountable with this project, that kind of thing for Madfish. But I also think like working that into kind of your own self-assessments, and then really bringing it into your interviewing process, right? As you bring on these people, make sure that they are living and passionate about those values as well. It's not just about their work credentials, it's whether they're gonna really add to your culture and be able to drive forward those values that matter to you.
Yeah, that was a great answer, that's solid. And so I guess when you guys do that assessment every quarter, do you guys kind of grade yourself and then create a roadmap for how you're going to get back on track for the next quarter? And then who do you release that information to the entire organization? Say, hey, this is where we're at. We really need to step it up in certain aspects.
Yeah, so we mostly do it just based on like how's our work going and how's our interaction with our team going at our size. You could just do it on a grading spectrum. So sort of like Rockefeller habits or something like that, write down like kind of what are examples of your values being alive and well, how well are you doing at those initiatives? And then setting core KPIs around your values could be helpful, so some key performance indicators for them. And then I would say, definitely sharing that with your whole business. That's something that we are really transparent about, and that kind of leads back to our core value of being genuine with our team and collaborative. So I think that that's really important. You need for everyone to be invested in your values. You can't be not sharing how you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's great. So do it internally, and then do you guys use it also as an external thing that you share on social, or you share with your clients quarterly or annually? Is it that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, we do a sustainability report every year, kind of an impact report, and we do kind of work that back to our values. Our values also work back to B Corp pillars as well as the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, so the SDGs. So really thinking about that. But I would say like our indication of whether we're living our values is through things like our ENPS scores that we do through a company called Office Vibe, but you could do through anonymous Google forms, and then also through our NPS scores, which we do through just a Google form as well. And we kind of try to make sure that we're seeing those values represented and that we have that really excellent score. We're lucky to have, over an 80 on our NPS and our ENPS. So right now we're feeling pretty good, but that's something that as we scale is really important for us to keep an eye on and measure regularly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess just playing like devil's advocate, or just, what would you say to someone that's just like, oh man, this is a lot of work, we're so busy with some of these other things? I mean, do you have any tips for how they can intertwine this with like maybe another meeting or another aspect of their business? Or is this something that people chisel out in a day? Or, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do this in a day, absolutely. I think having sort of a hackathon style thing around your values is really important. You could do that once a month, you could do that once a quarter. You don't have to be reporting on it like every week. Like that's probably too much. But I definitely see like this is something that like I happen to be passionate about, so I do. You probably have someone in your organization as you grow that is going to be passionate about this if it isn't you. And then on the other side of that, like operations pulls a lot of these numbers anyway. HR pulls a lot of these numbers anyway. So as you're growing, kind of incorporating those into your regular measurement tactics.
That's awesome. Have you seen some organizations where they just have like one person that is like kind of the brand ambassador, or just like
yes,
the champion of this?
Yes. So there's kind of two ways to do this. It could be your marketing manager, it could be your employee experience or HR person, and then another thing that we call it, like in the B Corp community, is a beekeeper. So whoever is kind of holding those sort of sustainable development goals accountable. It's kind of up to you. I think it's best to have
A cactus knows how to survive. It can endure scorching heat, limited rainfall, and defends itself against critters daily. Your business is no different. To survive harsh conditions, it's important to develop deep roots using media content that'll continuously nourish and support your marketing efforts day after day. Tactus Media is here to help you determine a strategy and create media content. Together, let's map out the next sequence of videos, podcasts, and social media to help your business thrive. Work with Tactus Media. Media tactics that stick. Ouch! Visit tactusmedia.com to learn more.
Okay, so now changing gears, talking about growth. So Patagonia, they've been around for a while, but say that you're a smaller business and you finally have moved through the stages of survival and you're actually making some money.
Yeah.
But then you start bringing on more people. You bring on a chief investment officer. You bring on a chief operations officer. All these different people that are telling you different things, and then you start seeing businesses maybe losing sight of their original vision that they had. At that stage, I mean, do you have any advice for people, especially because we're catching some of these business owners early.
Yeah.
So before they do that, should they do an assessment every 6 months, every year to say, hey, are we still aligned with our core values? And then if they've lost those core values, like recreating those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't really want to be changing your core values, you want to be sticking close to those. If they are no longer like alive and well in your organization, you need to look at whether you want them to be alive and well in your organization. We actually do quarterly assessments, so we do quarterly strategic planning with a business coach, but you could do that by yourself with just sort of a run through of questions, assessing like, do these values feel like they're alive and well? Does it feel like everyone in the business is living these values? And then we actually do like sharing examples of folks in the business who are living the values and how that works out. This person was collaborative on this project, this person was really accountable with this project, that kind of thing for Madfish. But I also think like working that into kind of your own self-assessments, and then really bringing it into your interviewing process, right? As you bring on these people, make sure that they are living and passionate about those values as well. It's not just about their work credentials, it's whether they're gonna really add to your culture and be able to drive forward those values that matter to you.
Yeah, that was a great answer. That's solid. And so I guess when you guys do that assessment every quarter, do you guys kind of grade yourself and then create a roadmap for how you're gonna get back on track for the next quarter? And then who do you release that information to the entire organization? Say, hey, this is where we're at. We really need to step it up in certain aspects.
Yeah, so we mostly do it just based on like how's our work going and how's our interaction with our team going at our size. You could just do it on a grading spectrum. So sort of like Rockefeller habits or something like that, write down like kind of what are examples of your values being alive and well, how well are you doing at those initiatives? And then setting core KPIs around your values could be helpful, so some key performance indicators for them. And then I would say, definitely sharing that with your whole business. That's something that we are really transparent about, and that kind of leads back to our core value of being genuine with our team and collaborative. So I think that that's really important. You need for everyone to be invested in your values. You can't be not sharing how you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's great. So do it internally, and then do you guys use it also as an external thing that you share on social, or you share with your clients quarterly or annually? Is it that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, we do a sustainability report every year, kind of an impact report, and we do kind of work that back to our values. Our values also work back to B Corp pillars as well as the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, so the SDGs. So really thinking about that, but I would say like our indication of whether we're living our values is through things like our ENPS scores that we do through a company called Office Vibe, but you could do through anonymous Google forms, and then also through our NPS scores, which we do through just a Google form as well. And we kind of try to make sure that we're seeing those values represented and that we have that really excellent score. We're lucky to have over an 80 on our NPS and our ENPS. So right now we're feeling pretty good, but that's something that as we scale is really important for us to keep an eye on and measure regularly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess just playing like devil's advocate, or just, what would you say to someone that's just like, oh man, this is a lot of work. We're so busy with some of these other things. I mean, do you have any tips for how they can intertwine this with like maybe another meeting or another aspect of their business? Or do you just, is this something that people chisel out in a day, or, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do this in a day, absolutely. I think having sort of a hackathon style thing around your values is really important. You could do that once a month, you could do that once a quarter. You know, you don't have to be reporting on it like every week. Like that's probably too much. But I definitely see like this is something that like I happen to be passionate about, so I do. You probably have someone in your organization as you grow that is going to be passionate about this if it isn't you. And then on the other side of that, like operations pulls a lot of these numbers anyway. HR pulls a lot of these numbers anyway. So as you're growing, kind of incorporating those into your regular measurement tactics.
That's awesome. Have you seen some organizations where they just have like one person that is like kind of the brand ambassador or just like
yes,
the champion of this?
Yes. So there's kind of two ways to do this. It could be your marketing manager, it could be your employee experience or HR person, and then another thing that we call it, like in the B Corp community, is a beekeeper. So whoever is kind of holding those sort of sustainable development goals accountable. It's kind of up to you. I think it's best to have everyone in the organization invested, and that way you can kind of split up the work because each individual task isn't particularly long, right? Like doing an ENPS, you should be doing that anyway. Doing an NPS, you're probably doing that anyway. Those are things that are just happening, and then just making sure that your values tie back to those questions. You don't have to over-survey people.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that beekeeper term. That's awesome.
So cute, yeah.
Do you guys ever try to get it outside of marketing or outside of HR into maybe ops or someone else, just so? Or like, have you ever seen like a rotating role throughout the organization?
Yeah, so we actually have like kind of a committee. We have a group of individuals who are all really excited about B Corp efforts. We work on EDI together. That's led by someone who's on our paid media team. It's not something that's led by like our operations necessarily. Yeah. So we really try not to focus too much on one role. It's really about bringing folks together. And then just making sure that there is a leader who's helping to drive that forward. So I kind of host our meetings every month. We do a 2-hour meeting once a month to workshop things and to get them where we need them to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I think that helps the listeners get an idea of like how to structure something of this nature. And then we have here on one of the questions, the courage to maybe address some of the social issues. I think we're moving into a new era where organizations are now, it's okay to be more vocal about where you stand on certain issues. And I think that can be scary for a lot of early businesses to like polarize or, but I've always been a fan of like, it's not good to be just like kind of vanilla or middle of the road. Like taking a stand on something, you're going to maybe upset some people, but you're going to bring a lot of people on board that it's going to reinforce why they trust your core values.
Yeah, well, you get a brand ambassador, right? Like when you're aligning with someone's values. And I think being afraid to state your values, like it's just as much of a statement to not state your values, right? Like that's something that people notice. It's not invisible to folks when you're not talking about important issues when everyone else is. So something to think about. You can, however, message that in different ways. I mean, we talk a lot about that because the B Corp movement is not liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, right? Like it's really about using business as a force for good, which is something that is completely bipartisan. It just may be about messaging that differently for your audiences. So, we talk a lot about kind of like our environmental work and like the initiatives that we're doing around sustainability and climate change. But if you're speaking to a more conservative audience, maybe that's talking about environmental stewardship, right? As simple as changing that word can connect better with folks and can really relate it back to what is important, I think that we're looking at interfaith coalitions that are working on climate change. We're seeing folks work on sustainability and inclusivity across the aisle. Like that isn't something that's necessarily on one side there. And so not being afraid to state like your intentions, you don't have to be political per se, but you should take a stand for issues you care about, and staying silent is just as much of a statement.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, not saying anything at all is you're still
certainly noticeable to those of us who are impacted by that.
That's awesome. And then I like that you say it's like it's not not bipartisan, it's not something that these values, they should be something that align with everybody, and it should be something that everyone can get on board with. And being a force for good.
Yeah.
And what can you do as a business? Because you really do have a lot more power than you think you do as a business by who you align with, who you purchase your goods from, et cetera, et cetera. So we talked about sharing your brand values. How can you go about doing getting this message out to the world that you are doing good stuff? And
yeah. I think you kind of have to build this into your existing marketing plan, right? Like I think that's really important. And one of the things that, we did at Madfish was we actually developed like a PDF that kind of let you make a marketing plan. And so I'll make sure that Brian has that link so that you guys can use that, or so that you all can use that. But I think really thinking about blogging and on-page content, video is really powerful for folks. And then even down to your presentations, right, that you're putting to your clients or to your internal team, thinking about, how is that out there on your packaging and your social media, and then how are you talking about those things, right? Like currently it's March, and March is B Corp month, so we've been really focusing on that. But it's something that you should be talking about year round, connecting your values back to your business, whether you're a B Corp or not. You want to be reinforcing that messaging. So just taking the opportunity, I would say, at least once a month, and for a lot of folks I would say once a week. You really want to be talking to that and speaking to that, because that's what keeps people coming back and engaging with your business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we'll include that link to the media plan in there, and I think that's great. And just like, I don't know, I think in my mind it's like kind of making space for it in the room, or making it being something that's like talked about frequently when you're having these small conversations. Just like, oh, how is this reflecting back to our values? And just getting that language and getting everyone on board within an organization. I think that's great. It's kind of opening a lot of good room for discussion and ideas, because it doesn't need to be like, oh, we're doing this values thing. It should be something that people get excited about. It should be something that everyone gets on board with. And then sharing that information publicly. What would you say to organizations that are like you said, they're like kind of afraid to toot their own horn?
It doesn't have to be all about you, right? It can be about the impact that you're making. So talk about the organization you volunteered with last month. Talk about the pro bono work that you donated. Talk about the money you donated. Talk about why. How does that connect back to your business? And then really talking about, I think, any internal policy things are always really interesting to people. I admittedly am like an employee experience nerd, and I find like employee culture and that kind of thing really interesting. But we see organizations like Buffer is a great example. They're a social media scheduling tool. They aren't B Corp certified, but they're very purpose driven, and they have completely transparent salaries. And so really thinking about ways for you to share about that feel like a service to others too. It's not just about being like, oh, this is what we're doing. It's about like, here's an experiment we tried, here's how it worked, here's how it didn't work.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, and we'll have to include a link to Buffer as well.
Their open blog is A+.
A+, that's awesome. Yeah, so hopefully this is giving the folks listening, some good examples, some good resources to look to. Do you have any tips for creating that content strategy as a small business?
Yeah, I think, start with your audience. Interview the folks who have bought into your company, see what they think about your values and the work that you're doing. Building from there, like really being candid with yourself about what's working and what's not. Where are your sources of traffic coming from? Where are you getting conversions? We mostly get our new clients from referrals. It's personal relationships, and so that's something that we've been focusing on a lot more over the past year or so. So just being really authentic about how you're sharing that vision, how you're talking about your values, where are those places, and then building that into your content strategy based on your streams of revenue. And then I think just making sure that you're kind of adhering to that throughout your communications. You want to have not necessarily like even a unified message, but you want to stay on brand, right? So having those branding guidelines is really crucial to make sure that you're not kind of varying too much. And I think just empowering everyone in your organization to be a brand ambassador is really important.
Yeah, to like kind of share things on social, share things publicly that align with the brand, and then maybe they're hitting one of those buckets of the values along the way. That's awesome. Any common mistakes you've seen people do, or is there any times when you've seen this like kind of backfire on people?
When people said that their values are alive and well, and they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at like just kind of the saga of what just happened with Away and their CEO, who came out to be like, oh, we're like relentlessly customer obsessed or something like that, and that meant that her employees were working until midnight on New Year's Eve, and that they are transparent, so that means everything's in Slack, and like they don't do email, even though it turns out that maybe part of the reason for that was the fact that the CEO was engaged to someone who worked at Slack, like these kind of weird things that come out later that turn out to be a PR nightmare. So I think just really being authentic, you never need to oversell it, right? Like people are gonna be impressed that you're working towards something. You don't have to be like, oh, we're like already there and like a leader, that's not necessarily what people are looking for. They're looking for that journey. So don't be afraid to share about your mistakes and things like that. I think it's that misrepresentation that rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, you brought some good examples there, because I can imagine if you're saying, oh, well, look how great we are, or like those, some of those values
So
you said
awkward.
are kind of, working really, we strive like to do our best at all these, and then overworking people, and I can only imagine. So and I think that's great, being open and with your audience. Say, hey, we're not there yet. This is what we're working towards, and then that whole journey piece. I think that's a huge aspect of marketing today. Is like bringing people on board with like, oh, we tried this, it didn't work. Being public and honest with that early, right? If something doesn't work, kind of coming to the forefront pretty quickly and letting people know. But that's awesome. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk about with getting your brand core values aligned with your marketing efforts?
Not really. I think it's just about building that content strategy, like starting with your values and kind of building that from there. I think using data is really important. So making sure that you are talking to your customers and like surveying them, I feel like that sounds like very Big Brother, but like putting out surveys and getting information from your customers.
Well, if they're willing,
Yeah. So I think that that's important. And then alternatively, like working with the right partner who can help you do that, because I do think it can be really overwhelming. And it is hard to keep it running. Like we see that ourselves as digital marketers in an agency. Like it's hardest for us to keep our own marketing going. So, never being afraid to ask for help, whether that's through freelancers or a company. So being kind of patient with yourself and knowing that that's going to take time and that it's a process.
Yeah. I think you brought up a great, I know it's kind of a aside, but you brought up a great point. Like, doing your own marketing efforts. If you are in the ad agency or in the marketing world, I think it's a lot easier doing it for another party. But when you kind of put the mirror and you're like, oh, what are we doing? It makes it tough. I don't know if ad agencies are hiring other agencies to keep them accountable.
God. Who knows? I mean, I know that for us, like we do our own, but we had to like build a marketing team internally. Like the same structure that we use for our clients, because before then it was just like me writing blog posts and working with our CEO, and it was just not consistent the way it needed to be.
Yeah, just all these short efforts. All right, well, we have the vacuum going, so it's probably the time to start wrapping this up. But if you guys can hear me, I'll also put this into the show notes. Let me dial down the microphone here. But anyway, so thank you, Giselle, for coming on to the show. If people want to learn more about you, they can go up to your LinkedIn, Giselle Waters, GISELLEWATERS.
Correct.
On LinkedIn, you might have a few new friends after this.
Exciting.
I guess they can follow you on social too, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, sure. I don't Facebook, but you can follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, Facebook's getting a little dated now. And then, last but not least, thank you for kind of representing Madfish and talking about some of the tactics and things that you guys are doing. If people want to learn more about Madfish Digital, they can just go to the website. Any other way, maybe read some of the blogs, and there's some follow-up information. And
you can follow us on LinkedIn. It's Madfish Digital, and then you can follow us on Instagram at GoMadfish.
Awesome. Giselle, you are super knowledgeable. This has been a blast learning from you, and I think helping the viewers get some good nuggets of information. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Shucks. Well, thank you for having me, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You bet.
I want to say a big thanks for tuning into the Media Marketing Podcast. Please subscribe to get notifications for new episodes, which are coming out every Thursday morning, or at least we're striving for that. Feel free to visit our Facebook page where you can like and join the media marketing community. This is a good resource for collaborating, sharing ideas with other media creators, marketers, and those just looking to build their network. So until next time.